Very good afternoon to you, perhaps good evening, maybe even good morning, or indeed if you're watching this on a recording, whatever time of day it is, you're welcome. We're going to spend about 40 minutes, 45 minutes in conversation. That's myself, Roger Atkins, with Angelika Berger-Sodian, somebody I've known, respected and admired for quite a long time. So, Angelika, that's a bit of a billing. I'm building you up, but I know you're not going to disappoint because I know you well. Hello, and how are you?
Hello, Roger. I feel flattered. First and foremost, thanks a lot for making time today. Thanks a lot for making time to speak to me today. I have been looking forward to the chat for a long while. Well, I'm in sunny Lisbon. As you may recall, I've relocated to Lisbon earlier this year. Life is super exciting here. I'm doing loads of speaking engagements recently. I'm building a new startup over here. So my life is very colorful, very exciting. And as I said, I've very much been looking forward to our chat today.
Well, good. I definitely have, because as I mentioned a moment ago, I've known you for the first time. In fact, I met you in China. I'd like to talk about that in a moment. But just to share with people what we both do, I'm sure a lot of people are joining this because they know you well, know your story, and they're keen to hear the detail. But if you haven't bumped into me on LinkedIn, it is a place I like to hang out. I've been on the platform for quite some time, 16, 17 years or something. I think it's a very good environment to communicate with people, to network, of course, that's what it is, but to share, to learn, and to collaborate. It's one of the best places. So that's what I do. My business is called Electric Vehicles Outlook, but in truth, it's just me. Basically, as a storyteller on LinkedIn, I make the distinction of not being an influencer. I don't promote products or services for people in that fashion. Influencing is fine, but it's just not what I do, and I don't think it works quite so well on LinkedIn anyway. I've been in automotive for 40 years. I've been in and around EVs for kind of half of that time almost now. And yeah, it's been my great pleasure to bump into people like Angelika and many others along the way. But that's who I am. That's what I do. And my job now is to find out as much as I can to share with you, the audience, in talking to Angelika. Angelika, over to you. Please just give us a nice little summary of who you are.
Thank you, Roger. My name is Angelika. I am Austrian by passport, but I really like to call myself a global citizen and a world traveler. Actually, I don't know many people who have relocated as often as I have and have lived in different places as often as I have. I have been in the automotive/mobility industry all my professional life, but I'm not an engineer. So I have actually a PhD in international management, and I started my career in organizational development and management development. And I'm still super grateful for that, because that has allowed me a very special perspective on leadership, on organizations, on how to run and build companies. I've lived in many different places, as I mentioned. I've lived for 7 years in China. I've lived for almost the same time in London. I'm now living in Lisbon. I like to call myself actually a business builder. I think this is really what I am, because particularly over the last 9 years, I have co-created, scaled, led various global e-mobility startups, all of them in very different segments, if you want, all of them with very different propositions, but all of them very exciting. And yeah, I guess this is me.
Well, it definitely is you. And like I say, there's a word that doesn't get used very often, but I like this word. It's one of these crazy English words. It's called peripatetic. You are peripatetic. What does that mean? It means you move around a lot. You try new things. You go to different places, find new cultures. So what I really hope we can share with people today is your story around how you've managed to do what you've done in the automotive industry, and certainly from the perspective of being a woman, because we both know, and I fully acknowledge as a man, that it can be quite a misogynistic environment in truth. And like too many industries, they are over-dominated by male thinking. Doesn't mean we're bad, doesn't mean, that thinking is right, but it's not a good blend, it's not a good mix. And as we've spoken about this many, many times, the simple fact that half of the world's population, give or take, are men and half are women, 4 billion on either side, you would think it would make sense to be a little bit more balanced and focused. And when you're looking for talent, when you're trying to find not just leaders, but when you're building businesses and looking for the right people. So it's work in progress to get that balance a lot better than it is. But let's start at the beginning, if I may, from when I first met you. Because if I'm honest with you, to be really honest, when I first met you, I didn't think you liked me. You weren't the person that I know now so well. You know, you like to laugh, you giggle, you're friendly, you're fun. But I remember that moment when I first met you in China, and I thought, I'm not sure I hadn't approached this properly. Do you remember that?
I do,
Was it
yeah.
something I said that wasn't quite right?
I do remember the moment. I don't exactly remember what we were discussing, but it was a misperception, Roger. I actually liked you from the very first moment. I mean, this is don't get it wrong. But no, actually, kind of, I always had a lot of respect for you. I think it took me also a while to get to know you as an individual.
Okay. If I'm really honest with you, I think it was because I knew you by reputation, and your reputation was that you were very confident. You had your opinion on things, and you were clearly very strong. You're a woman in automotive, doing very interesting things in a significantly interesting company at that time. So can we talk a bit about China? Because you said in your introduction, you lived there for what, 7 years? You worked for NIO, one of these fantastic new startup companies that we're seeing going from strength to strength in the auto industry. Give us a little flavor then about you went to China, and tell us about the book, because that obviously encapsulates your story, how you got the job at NIO, what you did there, etc. Can you give us a little flavor of that from telling and sharing with everybody about your book, please?
Yes, of course, more than happy. I think really kind of how I came to China is I actually followed my boyfriend at that time. And this is also something I think that many women need to be aware of, because most of them think, well, she has such a stellar career, she probably has planned everything step by step. Truth is, I have not. I have been very good at seizing opportunities, and then to a certain extent just also jumping on them, and then kind of making me grow, making them grow. But I have always been a big fan of China and of Asia in general, I have to say. Also back at the university in Graz, I specialized in organizational development and international management from day one. And I was always a huge believer and a huge fan of Asia, but I was doing my master's thesis in Tokyo, and my plan was always to go to Japan. But then my boyfriend at that time had an opportunity to go to China. He wasn't quite sure on whether or not we should go. So I said, we go. You accept that assignment, I come with you and we make that work. So I was at that time still with Magna Steyr. They were an amazing employer at the time. They have always been for me, and also always kind of, also given me lots of chances and opportunities. So I went to China together with my boyfriend at the time, and I made friends very quickly with the Chinese, because I immediately knew this is where I belong. This is such a fascinating, such a cool place. So I very early made friends with the HR director of Magna Steyr, a lady called Leslie, who has been of significant importance for me for so many years. And I think very soon we knew, okay, we are both quite entrepreneurial and there's loads we can do. So after a certain time, after her maternity leave, Leslie then actually decided to start her own recruitment firm, her own executive search firm. And I started also my own business. I was running a niche consulting firm for training, development, and we both actually supported primarily European OEMs coming into China. This is what we did for a few years. We made good money. We had a number of junior consultants. It was a small niche boutique firm, but it went really well. And then one day, as the Chinese would normally do, without much of lead time, she actually approached me and said, well, Angelika, I have to tell you something, I'm leaving. And that hit me quite badly, because I did not see that coming. Truth is, she was approached by who is now super well known, William Li and Li Hongqing, who were the founders back then and are still the president and CEO of NIO. And they actually hired her as HR director in China. And she back then, and I will always kind of remember what she told me. She said, Angelika, if only you would know them, you would understand why I have decided to accept that opportunity. Because what you and I have done over the past few years somehow belongs to the past, but what they are going to build will be the future. And promise, believe me, I have a good instinct, I have a good gut feeling. they will be the first global Chinese OEM. And I, at first didn't want to believe her. And also, I was to a certain extent offended. And I thought, okay, she doesn't want to work with me anymore. So maybe it's also time for me to close my China chapter to a certain extent. And I was even planning, to relocate to Singapore, and I had lots of job offers there. So I thought maybe it's time for me to move on. But she insisted that I would meet William Lee. And Mark Cho, who then happened to be my direct manager for the first year. And, call it first love in a professional context. I met those two. I immediately understood why Leslie was so fascinated, because I also felt the same. I thought, okay, I've never met anybody who had such a strong entrepreneurial vision, such a concrete plan of what they wanted to do, and was also that charismatic. So I reached out to my friends and said, guys, I'm relocating indeed. But truth is, I'm not relocating to Singapore. I'm actually relocating to Munich. Slightly different, because they had asked me, I think in the second interview, then also, or in the second meeting, it wasn't even an interview, said, Angelika, you are Austrian, so your mother tongue is German. Can you set up our design offices in Munich? They gave me all the freedom. They gave me all the, all the freedom, everything that I could possibly wish for. So I was part of the senior leadership team from day one. I was with them really kind of from the beginning until IPO, which was also an amazing experience, as you may recall. So I was with them in Shanghai, in Munich, and then eventually 2.5 years in London, which is also where you and I met.
Yes. Well, look, there's so much in all of that. Can I ask some questions around culture? Obviously, Chinese culture, better than most because you've lived there, is very different. But in terms of business, and you talk about William Lee there in particular, so he hired you, he'd hired Leslie, and then over in America, there was a significant hire there right at the beginning, wasn't there? Do you want to just remind us, please, who that was? Another woman.
Yeah, exactly. So William was also extremely smart in that regard. Today, everybody and every company wants to prove that they are well aware of diversity and that they kind of, do all the right things. I think that was, this was in 2015. Back then, diversity was not so high on the agenda, or at least was not so high as a speaking point on CEOs' agendas, if you want. William was exactly clear already back then. The way how he selected his senior leadership team all over the planet, if you want, was outstanding. So yes, right from the beginning, there was an Indian lady, Padma Varia. She was hired from Cisco. She was the former CTO of Cisco. She headed up the US organization. And I, as an Austrian woman, headed up the UK organization, which, as you may well remember, was an extremely male-dominated motorsports organization with, our own Formula E race team, with the EP9, with everything that was ongoing in that performance unit. So that was pretty cool, but also actually a risk to a certain extent. But I think, a risk also for William and for the Chinese to put women, because Padma also came from a very different environment originally, to put women as country heads into roles and also into, if you want, fields that they have never led or had it before. But I think it has worked out very well.
I think it has. And I think you're being, a bit humble here in that William Smart, to my mind, and I know him reasonably well as well, he didn't just hire 3 women, he hired 3 of the best people he could find. They happened to be women. Padmasree Warrior's background in software and understanding a lot of that world and being in California, that's part of that journey. Obviously, then the capability in Germany around, vehicle design and manufacture and all of those things, and your Magnus Steyr background, that's where you are in that regard. And then Leslie, clearly, who I don't know, to be honest, but I imagine was equally very talented at what she did. But the difference here is that you're seeing a young entrepreneur make the decision on merit, looking for the best people, but yes, importantly, not kind of having an unconscious bias or in some accidental fashion, not looking or interviewing or talking to women and just focusing on a small group of very talented men, which you could equally have picked from. So yeah, I'm fascinated by this, because what can you share with people men and women listening then around that unconscious bias thing, that thing that sticks in all of us, let's be frank, to a greater or lesser extent, maybe when we're hiring, as to, you know, the background of somebody, yeah, their gender, a few other things, of course, that you can't consciously express, but they sit there somehow. How can we help business, and let's focus on automotive, particularly with the big challenges now on the shift to electrification, etc. How can we help people be better at hiring the best people and not having that unconscious bias going on?
I mean, for me, I mean, as I mentioned, I've just relocated also to Lisbon, and I'm once again building now a new mobility startup. For me, I think it all comes down to mindset, and it comes down to values. Because, you know, I actually try to almost kind of distance myself from all these other discussions. For me, you know, when I have a clear vision of what I want to build, and this is exactly also what I have now with our new venture, then I really look for people who first and foremost kind of, how shall I say, almost kind of also jumping on your opportunity. So are available now to a certain extent, but then again, can live with this risk kind of, you know, that startups always come with. So have a certain level of what I like to call risk comfort, agile, have a vision. And what is super important also that are able to live with this ambiguity between, you know, working for a startup where they think, okay, this is really kind of, you know, something which will grow and comes with an amazing vision and future plan. But then at the same time, especially when you start a new venture, there is so much which just needs operational doing. There is so much where you say, okay, you always have to find that balance. And especially for me as a leader, this is sometimes also tricky to find that balance between what exactly do I need to focus on today in order to get that company started, in order to make sure that we are funded, in order to make sure that we take the next right steps. And at the same time, in parallel, always maintain this level of curiosity, this interest into future, this wish to build this long-term strategy and venture. So I am always kind of, you know, checking with people who I hire. Do they have the right mindset? And also to a certain extent, can they almost afford also to work for a startup? And when I say afford, I don't just mean that financially, I mean that also mentally, you know what I mean? Because as we all know, startups are not smooth sailing. So that this is really about, you know, being able also to stomach difficult times. So this is for me always the first criterion. Are the values right? And does this person come with the right mindset? And then, of course, as a second step, I always try to make sure that I have a diverse and inclusive workforce. So that I say, okay, for example, also I have to admit at the moment I have once again too many men employed. But then again, I think our startup comes already also with a very special proposition, because again, I am a woman, I'm an Austrian woman, and I'm heading a Portuguese international venture. So from that point of view, I also try to obviously implement from day one this very international inclusive culture and mindset. So whenever we hire, that I also say, guys, look at it. This is not well balanced. This doesn't come with the right values, and this doesn't come with the right mindset. I'm not a fan of quota. I've never been. I am a strong fan of mindset, capabilities, and then to make sure that there is a good culture which really focuses on, as I said, on performance, speed, and the right values.
Right. Again, there's a lot in that answer. But given that we've got, particularly here in Europe now, a huge challenge in making the transition to electrification, a lot of it are established companies that haven't been electric vehicle companies for a long time, and they're now becoming them, but they're dualing. They've got both. They're doing both at the same time. How difficult is it for leaders in those businesses? Is it a different job, or is it basically the same set of skills in terms of being a business leader in an OEM that's been around for decades compared to, you know, a new business? Because yes, you're right. Startup. I've been in a few startups. Startups are tricky. You have to be prepared to work long hours. You have to be very flexible. You can't be too precious about what your job title is and what you're supposed to do. Everybody has to muck in. All of those things, for sure. But the leader of that sort of business, are they completely different animals then? And I'm not going to name names. You know, the head of Volkswagen, the head of Mercedes, the head of whatever. You know, what are the characteristics then that you have to have, do you think?
Yes, very good question. And actually, I've been thinking about that for a while. because I'm very interested also myself in great leadership and finding out what really defines great leadership. And I'm actually a strong believer that there are certain factors which define great leadership, both in more established companies and in startups. But then again, those factors are also influenced by the relevant context and circumstances. So having said that, traditional companies, and I also have to say, I think with the change that we are all experiencing, I'm not even sure whether it is any company that may be considered as a traditional established company, because they also all have to transform, to rejuvenate, and to become younger. So my feeling is, to a certain extent, almost the leadership styles are getting more similar over time. Because if you think back a few years ago, there were really those established, more traditional OEMs. And then there was this new creature, there was this new kind of segment of upcoming startups. I think startups have always been super important because they are, in a way, they are disrupting the system, right? They come up with new technologies, new business models, they do things differently, they just kind of provoke change. So I think back then it was more for leaders in established companies to a certain extent. They probably had more long-term visions, they had more resources, they had a given strategy that they had to primarily execute, whereas the startup founders had to define the strategy, had to live with, had to be super resourceful and had to kind of come up with new creative ideas, how to sell their ideas, how to motivate the team. So I think a few years, or maybe even 1 or 2 decades back, there was a significant difference between leaders in more established companies and startups. Meanwhile, my strong belief is the future leadership style is an entrepreneurial one. So whether or not you are an entrepreneur or you are a startup founder, also in the more established environment, it is all about digital transformation. It is all about kind of being a good company, displaying good values. It is all about finding a good way of positioning yourselves with all the geopolitical issues that we have. I think the difference for me personally is that whatever you do as a startup founder in a startup has an even higher, how shall I say, outreach, or has even a higher effect to a certain extent. Because the good and the bad of a startup is it doesn't come with legacy. So you are the one who starts. So the way how I define my current venture will have impact, very direct impact, not only on my team, but on the entire ecosystem. Whereas as a leader in a more established company, it has to live with certain rules, regulations, but therefore also has a certain level of stability.
Yeah. What I would say, I mean, I'm not involved in it, but I think next month's Women in Automotive conversation is with Jacqueline McQuaid, who is President and Managing Director of GM Europe. And of course, Mary Barra is the head of GM globally. And you and I have met, I think, several senior women in that company. And increasingly, I'm pleased to say, as a man who's been in automotive all my life, I can quite easily list off quite a few names of people that I admire that happen to be women. And it's really good that that's happening more and more. There's one that I'm a secret sort of big fan of, actually, Rebecca Tanucci. She is the head of supercharging at Tesla. And when you see her present, something I'd love to be able to do, she's very succinct. She can come to the point. She doesn't ramble. And she came on, I think, the first quarter this year of the Tesla presentation and delivered this, well, it was 8 or 9 minutes, but it was like a masterclass in how to charge an EV and have a strategy in a business to do that. And I kind of just thought, wow, which leads me on to this question. Of course, everyone's an individual. We're not categories in many senses, but to certain things that we are. Are there differences that you've seen over the years between male leadership, female leadership? Either good things, not so good things, or things that we can work with? Are there characteristics that you've seen define that, a man and a woman leading a business?
Truth is, Roger, in the 20 years of my career in the automotive industry, and with the 9 years of me co-leading, scaling, and building global e-mobility startups, Padma Varia was my only colleague on C-level.
Right.
So I have never in my career had a female leader, and it was extremely rare that I had actually also fellow ladies on my level.
Yes.
So, and I think this is a statement per se. So I think I am extremely experienced with the male leadership style. And this is also why I have become a strong believer over the past 2 to 3 years. Not at the time when I was with the Chinese, not at the time when I was building the Chinese organization in Europe. This is also an interesting observation. Back then, I would have never considered myself as a feminist, or, you know, and also this word comes with nuances. So yes, I think I would never ever want to be a feminist in an aggressive kind of, you know, formal way. But this is also important to say. I think it was interestingly over the last 3 years, working more in Europe, working more in Germany, now also to a certain extent working in Portugal, that I realized, okay, there is a need to focus on something which I would like to call female entrepreneurial leadership style, or female entrepreneurial leadership. Because, and this is also something that you and I think, discussed over a few days or a few weeks ago, naturally, you know, guys come with this higher level of testosterone. Naturally, guys like to a certain extent to be more aggressive. They like the fights, they like, and again, I don't want to over-exaggerate, but I don't know how many power games I have experienced in my career. And I always had this feeling, to a certain extent, my male colleagues enjoyed it. They have been suffering also to a certain extent, but still, they thought, okay, where is the next power game that I can jump into? And this is just something I believe that we women don't have. So from that perspective, I really have to say, I think we are more collaborative. We are more into, you know, build something with a shared vision, aim. We want to do something good. Maybe that also goes back to the fact that, by nature's definition, we are more the mother type. I mean, I am not a mother, as you know, I don't have kids. And I think I'm probably also, to a certain extent, almost a bit more male than other female colleagues, because, for example, I have a very high level of risk comfort, which women normally also don't have. They are more overthinking, and they are also saying, okay, is this really good for me? Is this good for the organization? Is this good for my family? Which is something that I don't have to, because, you know, my husband, Peter, is amazing, has always supported anything that I wanted to do, and will always do so, I hope. But from that regard, from everything that I have seen from all the many male CEOs, presidents, colleagues, C-level fellows that I've worked with, I have concluded for myself, it is really important, and I almost see that as a personal mandate for myself, to make sure there will be more women in senior leadership positions, over the next few years, because I'm a strong believer this planet will be a better place if there is at least a kind of, you know, equal number of female leaders and male leaders. And I think, especially if you look at all the tragedies, all the bad that is happening on our planet at the moment, I think some qualities, some characteristics that women naturally come with or bring are beneficial. This whole thing about aiming to a certain extent to be a bit more collaborative, being willing to help the transformation and putting the, how should I say, the common good to a certain extent on top of the individual. I want to optimize my career. These are generalizations, of course, and again, I'm totally with you. Putting people into boxes and kind of, you know, working in generalizations has never helped anybody, but this is really also what I have observed myself over the past 20 years, and primarily the past 3.
And I think, yeah, I don't think it's bad to sometimes generalize, but blend it, you know, with specifics as well, and individual aspects. I honestly think that's all fine. And the word you've used there a few times, collaboration. The collaborative approach to change now is not just sensible and important, it's urgent. You know, yes. We all know the challenge of climate change and many other challenges, economic, social, tons of others. They are all things coming at us so fast, we have to be able to respond ever more quickly. And the only way to do that, you know, without burning yourself out, is to collaborate with other people, you know, collaborate in a team within a business, or collaborate, you know, across businesses to other parties, and try and that characteristic you mentioned there about competition, about sometimes enjoying a bit of the fight, if you like. I mean, I put my hands up in the air when you were saying it, because I know I'm guilty of it sometimes. But all the while you're doing that, you're not encouraging people to work with you. You're pushing back rather than, you know, your hands are going that way rather than that way. So I think that makes sense. And can I mention something? Because we talked about China right at the beginning, and I would like to talk a bit more about that. And also, by the way, invite anybody who's got a question for you to please, put it in the chat, and we'll ask you. But I remember a moment in 2010 when, without going through the whole reason why I was there, I had dinner with a number of other people, and the Chinese ambassador to the UK, Madame Fu Ying. Madame Fu Ying, to the best of my knowledge, was the only woman in the Chinese Politburo at the time, the senior kind of party members. And she was so visionary. She said to me, China was going to go on a journey, this is 2010, bear in mind, of progressing more renewable energy, of looking at sustainability to manage the huge population, to look at some of the social, economic, political challenges. I mean, maybe not so much political, but she talked about they wanted to have a journey into renewable energy and a journey into electric vehicles. And so that's what, 13 years ago. And then a few years later, they had Made in China 2025, which was the strategic, if you like, roadmap, business policy, if you like. And now that's revealed itself. Can I ask you this question as an Austrian, as a European, as a global citizen? Why particularly has the auto industry misplaced or just not seen China go on this development path? And now we're struggling to catch up and wondering what the heck we do about it. How has this happened? You've lived there, you've written books about it, you know people well. How have we got this seemingly so wrong, Angelika?
Yeah, Roger, very good question. Honestly, I don't really know. I mean, I have been, same as you, I've been at the IAA in Munich in September, and I wasn't sure whether I should laugh or cry when, all of a sudden I saw all these kind of announcements, and in all the media, it was the Chinese are coming. And I thought, really? And I wrote my book, or I published my book about why it's not too late to learn from China, and also how the Europeans should transform and how they should define their vision and what they could do and how they should also refocus on their own strengths. I published it 4 years ago. And this was also a very interesting experience for me back then. There was only a handful of people who truly understood my book. So many thought, okay, I mean, Angelika has always been a smart girl. Okay, the fact that she's writing a book is probably not a surprise, but they were looking and said, okay, what are you writing? The Chinese, no, are you really sure? Maybe they have a good vision, but I think quality will still be crap. So I think they did just not believe it. And what I find really interesting is, I think, and especially look at NIO, look at many others. Honestly, I mean, they always aim to be in the premium segment, and they are more than over-delivering now. And I think probably this also comes to a certain extent as a surprise, because especially I think the German OEM and the German kind of automotive industry, but the European same, they have been so proud. They have been so proud, and this was also part of their self-identity. We are the best. We have been leaders in technology for so long, and the cliche was, in a way, the Chinese are probably doing what the Chinese did many years ago. They were just copying. It's a copycat, and quality is rubbish. You and I have, I've lived in China for 7 years, and I've for another 5 years built NIO in Europe. So for me, I lived and I live and breathe still this kind of a Chinese entrepreneurial spirit. You also have been there on multiple occasions, so you also felt it. I think maybe it's a combination of all these factors. I think there was this pride to say, can't be possible. We've always been the best. We will be the best, combined with this level of ignorance, which is now, I don't know, now to a certain extent, I think the Chinese are a real threat now, but I mean, that could have developed really in a different way. And to a certain extent, I think, they probably still thought, okay, they will not be able to deliver. So quality will not be good. It will be a cheap copycat, but truth is, it is not.
Yeah, and you used the word proud there, that the European industry was proud of what it achieved. Yeah, good. That's fine. Some lovely cars and great propositions. But I think there's also a word arrogant, isn't there? Which can also accompany proud. Can I talk a personal thing? I hope you don't mind me bringing this up, but I remember a lovely moment when I was with you. In fact, I think it was in Austria. We were at an event. Can't remember the name of it now, but they were autonomous vehicles. There was an autonomous bus that we had a ride in. I remember that vividly because it was extraordinary. But that was a moment you seemed particularly happy. And I said to you, you know, what's happening? You're buzzing. And you said, I've met the love of my life, and I'd met him many, many years ago. He was the head boy at school. I was the head girl at school. We knew each other. I don't know, you know, how well you knew each other, but you obviously liked each other, I guess. And then all of these years went by, all of these years. He went on his journey of life, you went on your journey of life. And then circumstance, chance, fate brought you back together again after all these. I love that. I mean, I am, you know, I try not to be cynical about life. It's very easy these days, but I'd like to think of myself as a bit of a romantic. I'm lucky enough to have been married nearly 40 years. I love that story. When you, would you like to share that with people? Tell people what happened, because I think it's lovely.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, of course
No
it is.
personal thing.
Of course it is. Of course. Yeah, I mean, you know, I really love my husband, Peter. I mean, we have now been married for 4.5 years. And yeah, as you say, we met when I was 16 and he was 17 back at school. I think I was already bossy back then, probably, so was he, but me probably more. So I was the head girl of my school, and he was the head boy of his school. And we met at one of these, you know, head girl, head boy reunions to a certain extent. So yeah, we liked each other, but he was too shy to kiss me. So, you know, nothing happened, and, you know, we just continued our lives. And I was the one who was living, as you know, a very international life, and he was living also an international life, but he was still based for the entire, I don't know, 2 decades, if you want, in Austria, but also building his own company, living super international life. And it was, yeah, this is exactly something, call it destiny, call it, I don't know what it was it a coincidence? I think it was destiny, probably, that kind of, we reconnected when he turned 40. And yeah, I think it was only a week later that we started our relationship, and, you know, relatively soon after he moved in and we got married. But this is really something I'm happy that you bring it up, because this is a super interesting phenomenon, and this is also what I have experienced quite often in my life, that things which are meant to be happen, but they don't always happen at the time when you expect them to happen.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And again, that goes back to resilience, that when you're disappointed by things or things don't work out, don't let it crush you. Don't let it stop you. Don't let it put you off. And again, I'm sorry to mention a few generalizations. In my life, the women that I know, they are much more resilient. They're much more capable of dealing with family crisis, you know, all sorts of things. You know, my own mother was very strong, you know, and capable of dealing with many things. Can we kind of finish the conversation then, last few minutes, on what I think now is the big challenge of our time, an opportunity. Europe and America is trying to catch up with Asia. It's Asia, it's not just China. Of course it's not. And at the heart, inevitably, of any business, of course it is, are the people, are the teams. So what do you think we can now, what are you going to be doing differently to maybe tap into the world's hardest raw material, the most valuable commodity, the thing in the supply chain that you can't do without? People, talent. How do you see the next few years being tackled differently by people, not just at the leadership level, but let's sort of focus there mainly because that's been your background. Because I feel if Europe is going to catch up and America is going to catch up, it's going to be because we got smarter, we got better at what we do, and we just got on with it. We were resilient, in other words. Can you am I hoping in vain, or do you think this could happen?
No, it could happen. I think it should have started much earlier.
Okay.
But it could still happen. I mean, I think if I understood your question correctly, there were actually 2 questions in it. One was really kind of, what am I doing to make kind of this world now a better place? And
yes, please.
And the other is kind of, also what should Europe do overall to a certain extent. I mean, you also mentioned just before that you think I'm a very positive person, and you kind of, also know me as a positive person who likes to laugh, likes to giggle. I think this is important. I mean, first and foremost, this is me, this is who I am, and this is also about authenticity. But then also, I think especially in a world as we are experiencing it at the moment, with all the many crises on all the many levels, it is just also important to have some positive moments every day, and also to speak to positive people who say, listen, I want to create something new. I want to do something positive. There is hope. This is how I want to do it. Do you want to help me? Do you want to join? And do you want to kind of, share the journey to a certain extent? So for me, I think I want to continue to be a role model. And while I don't really like the term as such, because again, this sounds a bit too prestigious to me, and I'm not that person actually, but in the sense of it, I think this is what I want to be, and this is probably also what I should be. I want to be, a self-confident, proud woman who leads businesses and shapes and transforms the industry. And I want to continue to do that. And by that also show to the younger generation, for example, that I'm still living a happy life, that I found the love of my life, that I am happily married, that I live a quite balanced life, I would say. I'm working like a dog, but then again, also I find my moments to recharge. You know what I mean? So from that point of view, I think as an individual, and I also want to continue, and even more so now, I am a strong China ambassador. I have had a very extraordinary career and also journey with China. And I want to continue to share my positive learnings, and also to make sure that people here in Europe have a more realistic idea. Because also now what they should not do is to fall from one extreme into the other. For many, many years, they have been ignoring China. And now all of a sudden they think, now they are here. They are the big enemy. Now this is huge chaos and huge crisis. This is again the wrong approach. So this is about understanding more why they have been able to make such leaps and leapfrogs over the past few years. What exactly they do different. And once again, I don't think that now Europe should actually try to copy China. That would be wrong again. I think Europe has so many, extremely talented engineers, and is so strong when it comes to technology to a certain extent. There are so many smart people out there. I think what they should really do is also refocus on their own strengths and regaining self-confidence to a certain extent. So it needs to be different from ignorance, and it needs to be different from I don't know, arrogance. It really should be about, refocusing on what are we good at, who do we want to be in future, and what is really our unique selling proposition to a certain extent, purpose and also brand.
Yeah, look, that again, you're very good at answers. You're very good at giving a lot of detail in your answers. I've got to give you that. There's no doubt, Angelika. But I'm with you on this. I think the time has come to collaborate with China, not compete. The time has come to learn from China, not fight. We can all see in a particular part of the world at the moment where when you don't understand your neighbors and when you fight your neighbors, it just goes from bad to worse. And that the way forward for all of us it is to collaborate. That's easy to say, and we know it can be difficult. But as difficult as that is, the alternative is much harder. And I think certainly in the context of tackling climate change, dealing with air quality, looking at better equality, trying to, improve equity around the world in terms of access to energy, opportunity, all of those things, all of that will only come from much more collaboration and less competition. We won't ever get rid of competition, nor should we, because it inspires people, it gives people energy, it does lots of good things. But if it's only about competition, it will only be bad. We can see that through the lens of many things, like I say, particularly current events, which are just so dreadful. But what I've loved about listening to you again, and I've listened to you a lot, you've taught me a lot along the way. And when I came to China, you invited me, and I'm so grateful for that, because getting access to opportunity, traveling and meeting people and seeing different cultures, it is a huge part of, if anyone can do that in their career, it makes a massive difference to how you see your fellow human being. You see everybody much more as the same, even with their differences. Would you like to finish on a few words rather than me talking? This is Women in Automotive. You should have the last word. So before I mention it, just mentioning Jacqueline McQuaid It will be the November the 16th at 3 p.m. CET with Andy Follows. So on that note, please do have the last word.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. I think actually it wasn't me. I think it was another really intelligent woman who said exactly that statement that I would now like to quote. But I think this is more than true. There has never been a better time than now to be a woman in the automotive/mobility sector. So I think I really want to finish off with encouraging all the ladies who are on the call and everybody else who may listen to the recording later on. It's not about easy. The journey is not easy, but I don't think that any of us is looking for easy. We are looking for worthwhile. And we are looking for opportunities to make an impact. I think the way how we lead as women, our unique characteristics, our unique ways of engaging, of leading, of building, of collaborating, this is exactly what the future needs. And I would only want to encourage everybody to say, go give it a try. I'm sure you will enjoy, I'm sure you will grow, and you will make an impact to this industry and planet.
Great message. Angelika Berger-Sodian, thank you so much. And good afternoon to you and everybody who's joined us. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Bye-bye.